Welcome to Crime Unveiled Podcast. Dive deep into the mysteries that captivate us. Today, we delve into the chilling story of Theodore John Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber. Over nearly 2 decades, from 1978 to 1995, this enigmatic figure terrorized universities and airlines with a series of meticulously crafted bombs. His targets seemed random, his motives unclear. The nation was gripped by fear, the media scrambling for answers, and law enforcement engaged in a desperate, frustrating hunt for a ghost. We will meticulously dissect this case, exploring Kaczynski's background, his peculiar manifesto, and the painstaking investigation that ultimately led to his capture. If you appreciate this episode, please consider liking and subscribing to support us.
The Unabomber case is a truly disturbing chapter in American history. It wasn't just the violence itself, although that was horrific enough, resulting in 3 deaths and numerous injuries. It was the psychological element, the sense of an unseen predator lurking in the shadows, capable of striking anyone, anywhere. Kaczynski was a phantom, a whisper in the wind, leaving behind only mangled metal and unanswered questions. His bombs weren't simply destructive devices, they were meticulously constructed puzzles, each one a testament to his twisted intellect. And behind it all, a philosophy, a twisted ideology that would ultimately become his undoing. This case is a study in the darkness that can reside within seemingly ordinary individuals.
Kaczynski's early life offers some, but not all, of the pieces to this complex puzzle. A mathematical prodigy, he entered Harvard at the age of 16, demonstrating exceptional academic promise. However, reports suggest he was socially isolated, perhaps even struggling with some form of undiagnosed mental health issue. His time at Harvard was marked by both brilliance and a growing sense of detachment. After graduating, he pursued a career in academia, briefly teaching mathematics at the University of California, Berkeley, before abruptly resigning and retreating into the wilderness of Montana. This self-imposed isolation seems to be a crucial turning point in his life, the beginning of his descent into the darkness that would define the Unabomber.
The shift from promising academic to reclusive hermit is certainly a significant one. It's in the Montana wilderness, living in a small, self-built cabin without electricity or running water, that Kaczynski appears to have fully embraced his anti-technology ideology. This radicalization, fueled by his perceived societal ills brought on by technological advancement, became the driving force behind his campaign of terror. He meticulously planned and executed his attacks, targeting individuals he believed were symbols of the technological and industrial society he despised. He saw himself as a revolutionary, a warrior fighting against a system he considered inherently destructive.
The first bomb exploded in 1978 at Northwestern University, marking the beginning of a reign of terror that would span decades. Early attacks were relatively crude, but as time went on, Kaczynski's bombs became more sophisticated, more deadly. He became known for his meticulous craftsmanship, his ability to evade capture, and the chillingly impersonal nature of his attacks. Each bomb was a carefully constructed message, a testament to his growing obsession and his commitment to his twisted cause. The fact that he managed to evade detection for so long is a testament to his cunning and his meticulous planning.
The long duration of Kaczynski's bombing campaign only amplified the fear and uncertainty surrounding the case. The FBI dedicated significant resources to the investigation, codenaming it Unabomber, for university and airline bombing. Years passed with few leads, the public living in a state of constant apprehension. The unknown nature of the perpetrator, his seemingly random targets, and the absence of a clear motive made the Unabomber a particularly terrifying figure. The nation was effectively held hostage by an unseen, unknown enemy.
The investigation was one of the most extensive and expensive in FBI history. Agents followed countless leads, interviewed thousands of individuals, and explored numerous theories. The case was a constant presence in the media, fueling public speculation and fear. Yet for years the Unabomber remained a ghost, a phantom haunting the edges of society. The lack of progress was frustrating for investigators, and terrifying for the public, leading to a nationwide sense of vulnerability and unease. It seemed as if the Unabomber was always one step ahead.
One of the most perplexing aspects of the early investigation was the lack of a clear motive. Unlike typical criminals, Kaczynski didn't seem to be driven by financial gain or personal vendettas. He left no ransom notes, no demands, no clear communication of any kind. This absence of a readily identifiable motive only deepened the mystery surrounding the Unabomber and made him even more difficult to track. The silence was deafening, and the mystery surrounding his intentions made him a truly enigmatic and terrifying figure.
Before the fear, before the paranoia that gripped the nation, there was a quiet tranquility in places like Lincoln, Montana. Imagine a town where the air was crisp and clean, scented with pine, and the faintest hint of wood smoke from distant chimneys. Days unfolded at a slower pace, marked by the changing seasons, the rhythm of nature. People left their doors unlocked, trusting in the inherent goodness of their neighbors. Small businesses thrived, the heart of a close-knit community. The university brought a gentle hum of intellectual activity, a sense of progress nestled within this rural landscape. It was a place where people came to escape the clamor of city life, to find solace in the vast, open spaces, and the comforting predictability of small-town existence. It was a place where, for a time, the darkness seemed impossibly far away.
Yes, and within this idyllic setting, people pursued their passions with a quiet dedication. Percy Wood, the president of United Airlines, was one such individual. He lived a life that reflected the values of this community: hard work, family, and a deep connection to the natural world. He was known for his early morning runs through the wooded trails surrounding his home, a testament to his disciplined nature and love of the outdoors. He was a respected figure in the community, a leader in his professional life, and a devoted family man. His home, a testament to his success, was nestled within the trees, offering a sense of privacy and a tranquil retreat from the demands of his career. It was a place where he could unwind, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of his family.
The community surrounding the university was particularly close-knit. Faculty members often socialized together, sharing ideas and enjoying the camaraderie of intellectual pursuits. There was a sense of shared purpose, a dedication to education and research that permeated their interactions. The university itself was a hub of activity, a place where students pursued their dreams, professors delved into their research, and the exchange of knowledge created a vibrant atmosphere. This intellectual energy blended seamlessly with the tranquility of the surrounding environment, creating a unique and appealing atmosphere. It was a place where people felt safe, secure, and deeply connected to their community.
The rhythm of life was punctuated by the changing seasons. Long summer days were spent hiking in the mountains, fishing in the clear streams, and enjoying the warm evenings on front porches. Autumn brought the vibrant colors of the changing leaves and the crisp scent of burning wood. Winters were long and snowy, a time for quiet reflection and cozy gatherings around fireplaces. Spring arrived with a burst of new life, a promise of renewal and the return of warmth. This cyclical pattern of the seasons created a sense of stability and continuity, a comforting predictability that was deeply ingrained in the fabric of life in this community.
For people like Percy Wood, this peaceful existence was shattered by the arrival of an unseen threat. The Unabomber's first attacks were met with disbelief and confusions. How could such violence intrude upon this tranquil world? The initial reaction was one of bewilderment, a sense of unreality. This was a community that had always felt safe, protected by its isolation, and the strong bonds that held it together. The arrival of the Unabomber shattered this sense of security, introducing an element of fear and uncertainty that would forever alter the landscape of their lives.
The fear was insidious, creeping into the everyday routines of life. People began to look over their shoulders, to question the motives of strangers. The simple act of opening a package became fraught with anxiety. The trust that had been so fundamental to the community began to erode, replaced by suspicion and apprehension. The bombings created a palpable sense of vulnerability, a realization that even in this remote and seemingly idyllic setting, they were not immune to the darkness that existed in the world.
The investigation into the bombings was initially met with frustration. The Unabomber's meticulous planning and careful execution left few clues. The randomness of the targets added to the sense of unease, making it difficult to discern a pattern or motive. The community watched as law enforcement struggled to make headway, their frustration mirroring the growing sense of fear and helplessness that gripped the town. The bombings represented a violation not only of their physical safety, but also of their sense of peace and security.
The unknown nature of the attacker amplified the fear. He was a phantom, a shadowy figure lurking in the background. This lack of a tangible enemy made him all the more terrifying. He was not a face, but a specter, an embodiment of the unseen dangers that lurked beneath the surface of their peaceful existence. The community was left to grapple with the unsettling realization that evil could exist anywhere, even in the heart of paradise.
We left off discussing Kaczynski's early life and his extraordinary academic achievements. He was a mathematical prodigy, entering Harvard at the age of 16 and earning a Ph.D. from the University of Michigan by 25. His work on boundary functions was considered groundbreaking at the time. It's a stark contrast to the image of a reclusive bomber living in a remote cabin. This intellectual prowess, this rigorous analytical mind, makes his later actions all the more perplexing. We have to consider how someone with such potential could turn to such destructive methods. What was the catalyst, the breaking point, that led him down this path? The transition from esteemed academic to domestic terrorist is a complex and unsettling journey we will explore. It's a crucial piece of the puzzle in understanding the Unabomber.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember the context of the time. The late 60s and early 70s were a period of significant social and political upheaval. The Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the growing environmental movement, these were all forces that shaped the socio-political landscape. Kaczynski, even within the confines of academia, wouldn't have been immune to these influences. While there's no direct evidence linking his radicalization to specific events, it's reasonable to assume the turbulent atmosphere played a role. We also need to consider his personal experiences. Reports suggest he faced some degree of social isolation, even during his university years. This, coupled with his intensely analytical nature, could have contributed to a growing sense of alienation. It's a delicate balance, piecing together these potential influences to understand the formation of his worldview.
Let's delve a bit deeper into his time at the University of Michigan. While academically successful, it seems this period also marked a shift in his personality. Colleagues describe him becoming increasingly withdrawn, even exhibiting signs of paranoia. There are accounts of him expressing distrust towards technology and modern society. This seems almost like a premonition, a foreshadowing of his later actions. It's a subtle disruption, a crack appearing in the veneer of the brilliant academic. Imagine him, immersed in the world of complex equations, yet simultaneously harboring a growing resentment towards the very structures that supported his intellectual pursuits. It's a compelling and disturbing dichotomy.
And it's within these seemingly ordinary moments that the seeds of something darker were sown. He was teaching at the University of California, Berkeley, shortly after completing his doctorate. By all accounts, he was a capable instructor, but his interactions with colleagues remained limited. There's a sense of him observing, analyzing, perhaps even judging, the world around him from a detached perspective. This period, ostensibly a continuation of his academic trajectory, seems to have further solidified his disillusionment. The bustling university environment, a symbol of progress and intellectual advancement, may have ironically fueled his growing antipathy towards technology and its perceived consequences. He resided within this system yet felt increasingly alienated from its core values.
So we have this image of a young, gifted mathematician navigating the hallowed halls of academia. A seemingly idyllic picture. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. A storm of disillusionment, paranoia, and a growing resentment towards the very fabric of modern society. These early warning signs, these subtle disruptions, were largely overlooked or dismissed as eccentricities. Yet in retrospect, they appear as crucial pieces in understanding the transformation of Ted Kaczynski from a promising academic into the infamous Unabomber.
Precisely. He eventually resigned from his position at Berkeley, a decision that surprised many. This marked a significant turning point. He retreated from the academic world, severing ties with the established path he had so diligently pursued. He sought refuge in a remote cabin in Montana, a deliberate act of self-imposed isolation. This retreat, this withdrawal from society, allowed his radical ideas to fester and solidify, ultimately paving the way for his violent campaign against what he perceived as the evils of technological progress.
It paints a picture of a man wrestling with inner demons, seeking solace in solitude, yet finding only further fuel for his growing rage. The tranquility of the Montana wilderness became the backdrop for the genesis of a dark and destructive ideology. The quiet, peaceful imagery takes on a new tension, a sense of foreboding. This is where the Unabomber, as we know him, truly began to take shape.
And it's within this isolated environment that the meticulous planning and execution of his bombing campaign would take place. The very wilderness intended as a sanctuary became the incubator for his acts of terror. It's a stark juxtaposition, the serenity of nature against the calculated violence he was meticulously orchestrating. This stark contrast highlights the complex and contradictory nature of the man we are trying to understand. If you appreciate this episode, please consider liking and subscribing to support us.
In the spring of 1978, a package addressed to Professor Buckley Crist Jr., an engineering professor at Northwestern University, was found in a parking lot. The return address was listed as Professor Percy Wood, also at Northwestern. Suspicions were raised due to the unfamiliar handwriting and clumsy packaging. Professor Wood, when contacted, denied sending the package. Campus police opened the package cautiously. It detonated, causing minor injuries to a security officer. This marked the beginning of what would become a long and terrifying campaign of terror by the individual who would later be known as the Unabomber. The device, a rudimentary pipe bomb, offered the first glimpses into the bomber's methods. It was clear this was no accident, but a deliberate act of violence. The target, an engineering professor, suggested a possible motive linked to academia or technology. This first incident, while relatively minor in terms of damage, set a chilling precedent for what was to come.
This initial bombing was crucial for several reasons. Firstly, it established the Unabomber's modus operandi, which involved sending bombs disguised as packages to unsuspecting victims, often academics or individuals associated with technology. The use of a false return address, intended to mislead investigators, became a recurring tactic. Secondly, it signaled the beginning of a carefully planned and executed campaign of terror. This was not a random act of violence, but a calculated attack with a specific target profile. The choice of a university setting and an engineering professor hinted at a deeper grievance against technological advancement or the academic institutions that fostered it. Finally, the bomb itself, though crude, demonstrated a basic understanding of explosives and a willingness to inflict harm. This incident, while small in scale compared to later bombings, marked the beginning of a long and dark chapter in American history.
The initial investigation into the Northwestern bombing was hampered by a lack of physical evidence and credible leads. The bomb itself was largely destroyed in the explosion, leaving little forensic evidence to examine. The false return address led investigators down a blind alley, and there were no witnesses to the placement of the package. The motive remained a complete mystery. Was this a personal vendetta against Professor Crist? A protest against Northwestern University? Or something more sinister and far-reaching? The bombing created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty within the university community and beyond. The lack of a clear motive or suspect made it difficult to predict future attacks or implement effective preventative measures. This sense of vulnerability would only intensify as the bomber's campaign continued.
The use of a rudimentary device in the first attack is noteworthy. While the bomb was functional, its construction suggested a degree of inexperience or a deliberate attempt to downplay the bomber's capabilities. This could have been a test run, a way to gauge the effectiveness of the device and the response of law enforcement. The relative lack of sophistication also served to mask the bomber's true potential, giving investigators a false sense of the level of threat they were facing. This misdirection, intentional or not, proved to be a significant advantage for the bomber in the early stages of the investigation, allowing him to refine his methods and evade capture while the authorities struggled to understand the nature of the threat they were dealing with.
The initial reaction from law enforcement and the media was understandably cautious. The incident was treated as a serious crime, but the full scope of the threat posed by the Unabomber was not yet apparent. There was no public claim of responsibility, no manifesto outlining the bomber's motives or demands. This silence contributed to the mystery surrounding the attack and fueled speculation about the perpetrator's identity and intentions. The absence of a clear motive made it challenging for law enforcement to profile the suspect and develop effective investigative strategies. The media coverage, while reporting on the incident, did not yet grasp the significance of this first bombing as the start of a decades-long campaign of terror.
The targeting of an engineering professor suggests a possible connection to the field of technology. Was this an act of sabotage? An expression of Luddite philosophy? Or perhaps a personal grievance related to the victim's work? The choice of an academic setting also raises questions. Was the university environment seen as a symbol of intellectualism or technological advancement that the bomber wished to attack? These early questions, while unanswered at the time, would become increasingly relevant as the Unabomber's campaign of terror unfolded and his anti-technology manifesto eventually came to light. The Northwestern bombing, viewed in retrospect, provides crucial clues to understanding the motivations and ideology that drove the Unabomber.
Although the physical damage caused by the Northwestern bombing was minimal, the psychological impact was significant. This first attack created a climate of fear and uncertainty, not only at Northwestern University, but also within the wider academic community. The realization that bombs could be delivered through the seemingly innocuous means of the Postal Service heightened anxiety and led to increased security measures on campuses across the country. The bombing served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of individuals and institutions to seemingly random acts of violence. This sense of vulnerability would become a defining characteristic of the Unabomber's reign of terror.
The investigation into the Northwestern bombing, though initially inconclusive, laid the groundwork for the much larger and more complex investigation that would follow. The techniques used to examine the remnants of the bomb, the efforts to trace the false return address, and the interviews conducted with witnesses and potential suspects, all contributed to the development of investigative protocols that would be crucial in later stages of the Unabomber case. While the bomber remained unidentified after this first attack, the investigation established a foundation of knowledge and experience that would eventually prove invaluable in bringing him to justice.
The successful identification of Ted Kaczynski as the Unabomber marked a turning point, not just in the investigation, but also in the national psyche. For almost 2 decades, an elusive phantom had held the country in a state of unease. The bombings, sporadic yet impactful, created a climate of fear that permeated everyday life. People were wary of opening packages, of seemingly innocuous objects left in public places. The randomness of the targets amplified the sense of vulnerability. Now, with a face and a name attached to the terror, the nation could finally begin to process the collective trauma. But the relief was tinged with a chilling realization of the depth of Kaczynski's meticulous planning and the unsettling nature of his anti-technology manifesto.
Precisely. The capture didn't erase the fear overnight. In some ways, it intensified it. The image of Kaczynski, the disheveled, hermit-like figure emerging from his remote Montana cabin, became a symbol of the unpredictable nature of the threat. He wasn't a criminal mastermind in the traditional sense, but a highly intelligent individual who had meticulously crafted his bombs and evaded capture for years. This realization was deeply unsettling. It underscored the vulnerability of modern society to individuals operating outside the conventional structures of crime. The meticulousness of his attacks, the carefully chosen targets, the sophisticated construction of the devices, all pointed to a level of premeditation that was truly frightening. The fear shifted from the abstract threat of an unknown bomber to the concrete reality of a man who had successfully terrorized the country for so long.
The media played a significant role in shaping public perception of Kaczynski and the case. The constant coverage, the detailed analysis of his manifesto, the interviews with survivors and their families, all served to keep the story at the forefront of public consciousness. This saturation of information, while necessary for informing the public, also contributed to a sense of unease. The sheer volume of detail about the bombings, the meticulous planning, the devastating consequences, served as a constant reminder of the vulnerability we all faced. The media also grappled with the ethical implications of publishing excerpts from Kaczynski's manifesto, a document that espoused his anti-technology views. There was a delicate balance to strike between informing the public and potentially amplifying his message.
The impact on the families of the victims was profound and continues to this day. While the identification of Kaczynski brought a sense of closure, it also reopened old wounds. The trial, the media attention, the retelling of the events surrounding the bombings, all served as painful reminders of their loss. For many, the capture didn't bring the peace they had hoped for. Instead, it brought a renewed wave of grief and a struggle to reconcile the capture of the perpetrator with the enduring pain of their loss. The families had lived for years with the unanswered questions, the uncertainty, the fear. Now, they faced the daunting task of confronting the man responsible for their suffering and trying to make sense of his actions.
The investigation itself became a subject of intense scrutiny. The duration of the manhunt, the resources expended, the near misses, All were examined in detail. Questions were raised about whether the FBI could have apprehended Kaczynski sooner, the complexities of the case, the lack of a clear motive in the traditional sense, the challenges posed by the bomber's meticulous methods, made it an exceptionally difficult investigation. The public's need for answers, for accountability, fueled the scrutiny of the investigative process. The case also highlighted the limitations of law enforcement in the face of a determined and highly intelligent individual operating outside the conventional norms of criminal behavior.
And the very nature of the bombings, the targeting of individuals seemingly chosen at random, contributed to a widespread sense of paranoia. The absence of a clear pattern, beyond the connection to technology and academia, made it difficult for people to assess their own risk. The bombings weren't confined to a specific geographic area or a particular demographic, which heightened the sense of vulnerability. Anyone could be a target. This randomness, this lack of a discernible motive beyond Kaczynski's broader philosophical objections to technology, was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the case.
Absolutely. The Unabomber case became a chilling example of how an individual, driven by a radical ideology and possessing the technical skills to act on his beliefs, could disrupt society and instill widespread fear. It forced a reassessment of security protocols, particularly in universities and research institutions, and prompted a broader conversation about the potential dangers of unchecked technological advancement. The case left an indelible mark on the American psyche, serving as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities of modern life.
The case continues to fascinate and horrify, prompting ongoing analysis and discussion. The complexities of Kaczynski's motivations, the meticulousness of his crimes, the impact on the victims and their families, and the broader societal implications of the case continue to resonate. The Unabomber case serves as a cautionary tale about the potential for individual acts of terror to disrupt society and the enduring power of fear. The case remains a dark chapter in American history, a reminder of the fragility of safety and the enduring quest for understanding in the face of the inexplicable.
Let's delve deeper into Kaczynski's psychology. He was a mathematical prodigy, earning his Ph.D. from the University of Michigan at a remarkably young age. He then secured a prestigious teaching position at the University of California, Berkeley. This intellectual prowess paints a picture of a highly capable individual, someone seemingly destined for a successful academic career. However, beneath this veneer of intellectual brilliance, a darker, more troubled persona was developing. His writings, later discovered by investigators, revealed a deep-seated resentment towards technological advancement and industrial society. This internal conflict, the dissonance between his intellectual achievements and his growing anti-technology ideology, seems to be a key element in understanding his eventual descent into violence.
You're right to highlight that contradiction. Here was a man capable of complex mathematical reasoning, working within the very system he ultimately sought to destroy. He wasn't just academically gifted, he lived and worked within the heart of academia. He experienced firsthand the advancements and changes he so vehemently opposed. This proximity, this immersion in the very thing he despised, likely fueled his resentment and radicalized his beliefs. It wasn't a theoretical rejection of technology, it was a personal, visceral reaction to the world around him, a world he was intimately a part of.
Precisely. And this internal struggle manifested itself in his increasingly isolated lifestyle. He resigned from his Berkeley position after only 2 years, retreating to a remote cabin in Montana. This self-imposed isolation further solidified his antisocial tendencies and allowed his radical ideology to fester and grow unchecked. Cut off from the intellectual discourse and social interaction of academia, he became increasingly fixated on his own distorted worldview. The cabin wasn't just a physical retreat, it was a symbolic retreat from a society he viewed as corrupt and destructive.
This isolation, coupled with his intellectual capacity, allowed him to meticulously plan and execute his attacks. He wasn't a spur-of-the-moment bomber, he was a calculated and meticulous criminal. He crafted sophisticated explosive devices, carefully choosing his targets to maximize their impact and spread fear. His bombings weren't random acts of violence, they were strategically planned assaults on what he perceived as the symbols of technological advancement and industrial society. The sophistication of his devices stands in stark contrast to the primitive living conditions he chose for himself.
That contrast is truly striking. He lived a life of deliberate simplicity, rejecting the comforts and conveniences of modern life, Yet he possessed the technical expertise to create incredibly complex and deadly devices. This duality is a central paradox in understanding Kaczynski. He was a man of immense intellect who chose to live a life of almost monastic simplicity. Yet he used his intelligence to inflict terror and violence.
And we see this duality reflected in his manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future. The document is a complex and articulate critique of modern society, showcasing his intellectual capabilities and his deeply held beliefs. Yet, it is also a justification for his acts of terror, a testament to the distorted logic that drove him to violence. The manifesto is a chilling window into the mind of a man torn between intellectual brilliance and destructive rage.
His journals further reveal the depth of his psychological complexities. They document his meticulous planning, his obsessive attention to detail, and his unwavering commitment to his cause. They also reveal glimpses of his personal struggles, his loneliness, and his growing paranoia. These journals provide invaluable insight into the inner workings of a mind driven to extremes.
It's crucial to remember, while we analyze his psychology, that understanding his motivations does not excuse his actions. His bombings caused immense suffering and fear. While exploring the complexities of his character is essential for comprehending the case, it does not diminish the gravity of his crimes. His victims and their families bear the lasting scars of his actions.
Let's delve into the complexities of the Unabomber investigation. It spanned nearly 2 decades, marked by frustration, dead ends, and the constant pressure to stop a seemingly unstoppable individual. The FBI's Unabomber task force, one of the largest and most expensive in history, faced a unique challenge. Kaczynski's meticulous planning and execution left minimal physical evidence, making him a ghost in the system. Early profiles suggested a blue-collar worker with an aviation background, a theory that ultimately proved inaccurate and steered the investigation off course for a considerable amount of time. They also focused heavily on the Chicago area due to the early bombing's location, another misleading detail. These initial missteps, however understandable given the limited information at the time, allowed Kaczynski to continue his campaign of terror for years.
The task force grappled with the almost complete absence of forensic clues at the bomb sites. Kaczynski meticulously crafted his devices from readily available materials, leaving little to trace back to him. He also took painstaking measures to eliminate fingerprints and avoid leaving any DNA evidence. This forensic counterintelligence, combined with his isolated lifestyle, created a significant hurdle for investigators. The case became as much about deciphering the Unabomber's motives as it was about tracking him down. His targets suggested a pattern in anger directed at technology and industrial society, but this itself was a broad stroke to paint with and provided limited insight into his specific identity. The task force pored over thousands of tips and leads, most of which proved to be fruitless, further adding to the immense challenge.
The investigation was further complicated by Kaczynski's taunting communications. He sent letters to newspapers and individuals, including the New York Times and Dr. Charles Epstein, a geneticist and one of his victims. These communications, signed with the FC moniker, an abbreviation for Freedom Club, served to solidify his anti-technology ideology and mocked the FBI's efforts to apprehend him. He provided misleading clues and red herrings, intentionally diverting resources and adding layers of complexity to an already intricate case. This cat-and-mouse game played out in the public eye, with Kaczynski seemingly reveling in the notoriety and the challenge he posed to law enforcement. The letters added a psychological dimension to the investigation, forcing the task force to consider the mind of their adversary as much as the physical evidence, or lack thereof.
One particularly significant communication was the Unabomber Manifesto, a 35,000-word treatise titled Industrial Society and Its Future. Published in the Washington Post and the New York Times in 1995, it outlined Kaczynski's anti-technology philosophy and his motivations for the bombings. While this publication offered insights into his ideology, it also presented a unique dilemma. Should the task force prioritize the ethical implications of publishing potentially harmful material, or should they hope it could lead to a breakthrough in the case? The decision to publish was a calculated risk, one that ultimately paid off but not without considerable debate.
The publication of the manifesto did indeed prove pivotal. It prompted David Kaczynski, Ted's brother, to recognize similarities between the writing style and ideas presented in the manifesto and letters he had received from Ted over the years. David's decision to come forward was a monumental turning point in the investigation, offering a sliver of hope after years of frustration. This act of courage, though undoubtedly difficult for David and his family, finally provided the crucial lead the FBI needed to zero in on a suspect. It exemplifies the complex role of family and personal relationships in such cases, sometimes becoming the unexpected key to unlocking seemingly impenetrable mysteries.
The investigation underscores the complexities of tracking down individuals who operate outside conventional criminal patterns. Kaczynski's intelligence, meticulous planning, and deliberate avoidance of traditional investigative trails made him an exceptionally difficult target. The case also highlights the crucial role of public engagement. While David's tip ultimately led to the arrest, it was the culmination of thousands of tips, leads, and countless hours of investigation that brought the case to that critical juncture. Every piece of information, no matter how seemingly insignificant, played a role in building the puzzle.
The Unabomber case remains a stark reminder of the challenges law enforcement faces in the pursuit of justice, particularly when confronted with individuals driven by complex ideologies and operating in the shadows. The years of frustration, the dead ends, and the false leads underscore the dedication, persistence, and innovative thinking required to bring such cases to a close. It also serves as a case study in the power of public collaboration and the vital role it can play in solving even the most perplexing crimes.
And it highlights the delicate balance between respecting the public's right to information and the potential harm that can arise from disseminating potentially dangerous ideologies. The decision to publish the manifesto, while ultimately beneficial to the investigation, remains a subject of ethical debate and a reminder of the difficult choices that often accompany high-profile investigations. It begs the question: would Kaczynski have stopped had the manifesto not been published? It remains, perhaps, one of the biggest unanswered questions of the case.
The psychological impact of Kaczynski's bombings extended far beyond the physical injuries inflicted. Victims lived with the constant fear of another attack, a fear that permeated their daily lives. They developed hypervigilance, scanning their surroundings for potential threats, wary of opening packages, or even checking their mail. This state of perpetual anxiety often led to long-term psychological trauma, manifesting as PTSD, depression, and debilitating phobias. The seemingly random nature of the attacks contributed to a pervasive sense of unease, leaving individuals feeling vulnerable and powerless. The bombings shattered their sense of security and trust, impacting their relationships and overall quality of life.
The ripple effect of this fear extended to the families of victims. They too lived under the shadow of Kaczynski's reign of terror. They grappled with the emotional burden of witnessing the suffering of their loved ones, dealing with the physical and psychological aftermath of the attacks. The families also carried the weight of their own unanswered questions, their own search for understanding in the face of such senseless violence. The trauma experienced by families often went unrecognized or unaddressed, adding another layer of complexity to their healing process. The long-term effects were profound, impacting family dynamics and creating intergenerational trauma that continues to resonate today.
The Unabomber's campaign of terror had a chilling effect on the entire nation. The seemingly arbitrary nature of his targets fostered a climate of fear and uncertainty. People became suspicious of everyday objects, questioning the motives of strangers. The media coverage, while necessary to inform the public, inadvertently amplified the sense of panic and vulnerability. The uncertainty surrounding the bomber's identity and motives further fueled public anxiety. The nation held its breath, waiting for the next inevitable attack. This period of sustained fear had a profound impact on the American psyche, shaping public perception of safety and security for years to come.
The communities directly impacted by the bombings, particularly university campuses and airline hubs, experienced a significant shift in their social fabric. The bombings eroded trust within these communities, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and fear. People became more guarded in their interactions, less willing to engage with strangers. The constant threat of violence disrupted the sense of community and belonging, leaving individuals feeling isolated and vulnerable. The bombings also led to increased security measures, transforming once open and accessible spaces into tightly controlled environments. This shift had a lasting impact on the character of these communities, altering the way people lived, worked, and interacted with one another.
One of the most insidious consequences of the Unabomber attacks was the erosion of trust in institutions. The FBI, tasked with apprehending the bomber, was under immense pressure to solve the case. The length of the investigation, coupled with the lack of tangible progress for many years, led to public frustration and skepticism about the agency's competence. The reliance on profiling techniques, which sometimes led to misdirected investigations, further fueled public distrust. This erosion of trust had broader implications for society, extending beyond law enforcement to encompass other institutions responsible for public safety and security.
The media played a complex role in shaping public perception of the Unabomber case. While the media provided crucial information about the bombings and the ongoing investigation, their coverage also contributed to the sense of fear and anxiety. The constant updates and speculation often sensationalized the story, amplifying the bomber's mystique and creating a climate of heightened alert. The media also faced ethical dilemmas regarding the publication of Kaczynski's manifesto, weighing the public's right to know against the potential for copycat crimes. The media's role in the Unabomber case highlighted the delicate balance between informing the public and managing public fear during a national crisis.
The long-term effects of the Unabomber attacks are still felt today. The bombings served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of modern society to acts of domestic terrorism. They highlighted the challenges of balancing individual liberties with the need for national security. The case also raised important questions about the role of technology in society and the potential for its misuse. The Unabomber case continues to be studied by law enforcement, psychologists, and sociologists, providing valuable insights into the motivations of domestic terrorists and the long-term consequences of their actions.
The Unabomber case stands as a chilling example of the devastating impact of domestic terrorism, not just on individuals but on entire communities and the nation as a whole. The long-term psychological trauma experienced by victims and their families, the erosion of trust in institutions, and the lingering sense of unease serve as a testament to the enduring legacy of Ted Kaczynski and his campaign of terror. The case continues to prompt reflection on the complexities of human behavior, the roots of violence, and the ongoing need for vigilance in the face of potential threats.
The investigation had hit a wall. Years had passed, the bombings continued sporadically, and the Unabomber remained a phantom. The task force, now hundreds strong, was drowning in data, sifting through mountains of tips, potential leads, and psychological profiles. The manifesto, published under duress by the FBI in 1995, offered a glimpse into the bomber's mind, a complex and twisted ideology railing against industrial society and technological advancement. It provided some linguistic clues but no concrete leads to his identity. The frustration was palpable. The public fear remained high. The case seemed destined to remain unsolved. Another chilling example of an elusive criminal mastermind outwitting law enforcement.
Then, a seemingly insignificant event triggered a chain reaction. Ted Kaczynski's brother, David, and his wife, Linda Patrick, began to suspect that the Unabomber's writings bore an uncanny resemblance to letters Ted had written to them over the years. The themes, the language, the idiosyncratic phrasing, it all seemed to point to the same source. This was a deeply unsettling realization, a suspicion they initially resisted, but the evidence, however circumstantial, became increasingly difficult to ignore. They faced a terrible dilemma, a conflict between loyalty to family and a civic duty to prevent further violence. Their decision to contact the FBI would prove pivotal, a turning point in the long and arduous hunt for the Unabomber.
The information provided by David Kaczynski was treated with utmost caution. While it was a significant lead, it was still circumstantial. The FBI needed concrete evidence to obtain a search warrant for Ted Kaczynski's remote cabin in Lincoln, Montana. Agents meticulously compared the writings in the manifesto to letters Ted had written to his family and others. They analyzed the linguistic patterns, the vocabulary, the specific phrases, and the recurring themes. The similarities were striking, far beyond mere coincidences. The linguistic analysis, combined with David Kaczynski's recollections of Ted's past behaviors and anti-technology sentiments, began to build a compelling, albeit disturbing, picture.
The search warrant for the cabin was granted, and on April 3, 1996, FBI agents descended upon the isolated property. What they found was a treasure trove of evidence. Hidden within the small, unassuming cabin were bomb-making materials, components matching those used in the Unabomber devices, and, crucially, a handwritten journal. This journal contained detailed descriptions of the bombings, confirming beyond any reasonable doubt that Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber. The discovery sent shockwaves through the nation, a mixture of relief and disbelief that the elusive figure who had terrorized the country for nearly 2 decades had finally been unmasked.
The arrest of Ted Kaczynski marked the end of a reign of terror. The meticulous investigation, the tireless efforts of law enforcement, and the crucial information provided by David Kaczynski had finally brought the Unabomber to justice. The sheer volume of evidence discovered in the cabin was overwhelming, leaving no doubt about his guilt. The case became a landmark in forensic linguistics, demonstrating the power of language analysis in criminal investigations.
Kaczynski's capture brought a sense of closure to the victims and their families, although the scars of his crimes would remain. The Unabomber case continues to be studied and analyzed, not only for its investigative complexities but also for its exploration of the darker aspects of human nature, the potential for radicalization, and the devastating consequences of unchecked extremism. The story serves as a chilling reminder of the unpredictable nature of violence and the enduring challenges of understanding and preventing acts of terrorism.
The legal proceedings that followed Kaczynski's arrest were complex. He initially pleaded not guilty, but eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, he accepted a plea agreement, avoiding the death penalty, and receiving 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The plea bargain spared the victims and their families the ordeal of a lengthy and potentially traumatic trial.
The Unabomber case remains a significant chapter in the history of American crime. It highlighted the challenges posed by domestic terrorism, the increasing importance of forensic science in criminal investigations, and the delicate balance between individual liberties and national security. The case continues to fascinate and disturb, a testament to the enduring power of the human capacity for both brilliance and destruction.
If you appreciate this episode, please consider liking and subscribing to support us. >person 1 greater than, person 1 greater than. It's chilling to consider Kaczynski's double life. He lived in a tiny cabin, detached from society. Yet he was meticulously constructing and delivering these deadly devices that terrorized the nation for nearly 2 decades. The contrast between his outward appearance of a simple, reclusive man and the calculated, destructive nature of his actions is truly disturbing. The FBI's Unabomber task force, one of the largest and most expensive investigations in history, was dedicated to finding this phantom, and they were essentially looking for someone who had vanished into the wilderness. He existed just outside the periphery of what we consider normal, a ghost in the system, operating undetected for years. It highlights the challenge of identifying individuals who operate outside of societal norms and expectations, and how difficult it can be to penetrate that veil of normalcy, even with extensive resources.
Exactly. And the sheer meticulousness of his work, the planning, the construction of the bombs, the selection of targets, all point to a mind obsessed with his anti-technology ideology. He wasn't simply acting out of rage, but rather following a twisted, self-constructed philosophy. His manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, provides a disturbingly detailed rationale for his actions, albeit a rationale rooted in a profound distrust of technological advancement. It raises questions about the nature of radicalization, the power of individual beliefs, and how easily those beliefs can be distorted into justifications for violence. It also exposes the limitations of profiling, as Kaczynski defied many of the initial assumptions about the Unabomber's identity. The investigation ultimately became a complex puzzle of linguistics and forensic analysis, a testament to the difficulty of apprehending a criminal who deliberately avoids leaving a traditional trail.
The fact that his brother, David, played a crucial role in identifying him adds another layer of complexity to this case. Imagine the internal struggle David must have faced, suspecting his own brother of these horrific acts. It was a decision that undoubtedly carried immense emotional weight, but ultimately contributed to ending the bombings and bringing Kaczynski to justice. It underscores the difficult choices that sometimes arise in criminal investigations, the ethical dilemmas faced by those closest to the perpetrator. It's a testament to David's courage and sense of responsibility that he came forward, despite the personal cost. The case highlights the impact these crimes have, not only on the victims and their families, but also on the families of the perpetrators, who are often left grappling with the unimaginable actions of their loved ones.
And what's particularly unsettling is that Kaczynski was highly intelligent. He was a mathematical prodigy, a Harvard graduate, someone who could have contributed significantly to society. Instead, he chose a path of destruction, driven by a warped ideology. It challenges the notion that intelligence is somehow a safeguard against extremism or violence. In fact, it demonstrates how intellect can be weaponized, used to rationalize and execute acts of terror. His case serves as a stark reminder that brilliance can be a double-edged sword, capable of both great good and terrible harm. This duality is perhaps one of the most disturbing aspects of the Unabomber story, the realization that potential for good can be twisted into something so destructive.
The Unabomber case remains a significant event in American history, not only for the fear it instilled, but also for the questions it raises about the nature of domestic terrorism and the challenges of identifying and apprehending those who operate outside the boundaries of conventional criminal behavior. It forced law enforcement to adapt its methods and consider new approaches to investigation in the face of an elusive and highly intelligent adversary. The case continues to be studied and analyzed, offering valuable lessons in criminal profiling, forensic science, and the complexities of human motivation.
It's a story that continues to resonate. It reminds us that evil can lurk in unexpected places, sometimes hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy. It compels us to question our assumptions about who is capable of violence and to consider the factors that can contribute to radicalization. It's a story that leaves us with a lingering unease, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside within seemingly ordinary individuals. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all remains, could it happen again?
And with that chilling thought, we conclude this exploration of the Unabomber case.
If you appreciate this episode, please consider liking and subscribing to support us.
Thank you for walking with us through the shadows. The story doesn't end here. It lingers, echoing through time, reminding us that the darkest truths often hide in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant.
Goodbye.